All right, good morning, everybody. Today we're talking about the complexity of the body. I've been studying anatomy since high school, so 53 years ago if you do the math, and probably operated on 45,000 people or so. So that gives me some credentials to say I'm, an expert about the complexity. This is what I do most days, and so you might surmise that after a few minutes of conversation with me, most people fall into a very deep sleep. So I won't be offended if you doze off. I might take your appendix out, but the source is this is the Human Body book by Steve Parker. It's great anatomy to show. People say beauty's only skin deep, but surgeons like what's below the skin. It's a great book for the anatomy, but it's certainly got an evolutionary bend if you read the text. This is a book of electron micrographs, shows things in very fine detail. Some of the videos I got are even finer than this, but they're somewhat imaginary. It's what people presume by the way they look to put molecules together under scanning. But I always used to think if Darwin had this, he'd come to different conclusions. But that's not true because most of my comrades at UVA see all this and more and still deny a creator. And of course, the Bible is a major source. I like the acronym that Bible stands for Basic Information Before Leaving Earth. And I've seen a lot of people die in 42 years of practice, and those that understand the Bible are more at peace with what's coming in terms of that. So we're talking about the creation of the body. Creationists, evolutionists, we have all the same evidence. We have the same earth, fossils, plants, animals. Today we're talking about the human body. We have the same human body to try to understand. And the question is, why do they come to such different conclusions about the origin of life and specifically the human body? And the answer is presuppositions. If you don't know what a presupposition is, it's basically things that are assumed beforehand to be true at the beginning of a line of argument. It's basically our worldview. An example is I believe God created the human body as he said he did on the sixth day of creation approximately 6,000 years ago. I assume this to be true. I can't prove it today. I just believe God's word. I take it by faith. And this forms my worldview about the human body. When I have an atheist talking to me and I say, you got faith? He said, well, I don't have any faith. And I said, so you don't believe what you're saying, do you? He said, well, of course I believe what I'm saying. I said, well, then you got faith in your ideal. So they try to throw faith as just a religious term, but it's not. All scientists have faith. I have faith that, the nuclear bomb's going to go off. They didn't really know till they, dropped the first one, but they had faith that this was going to work. And I think all the evidence supports special creation. Most of my colleagues are evolutionists, and they have beliefs in the past and present that they presume to be true. Some of them presume no God. Others just at least there's no God who performed acts of special creation. So they have a whole different way of thinking or a different worldview. And their belief system, in my opinion, makes it very difficult for them to explain the complexity of the human body. Does it really matter? This is Professor William Provine. He was in the Department of Evolutionary Biology at Cornell, and this is a typical lecture that your freshmen in college will hear.
Let me summarize my views on what modern evolutionary biology tells us, loud and clear. And I must say that these are basically Darwin's views. There are no gods, no purposive forces of any kind, no life after death. When I die, I am absolutely certain that I'm going to be completely dead. And when you die, you're not going to be surprised because you're going to be completely dead. Now me, if I live after I'm dead, I'm going to be really, really surprised. But at least, I'm going to go to hell, where I won't have all those grinning preachers from Sunday morning with me. That's going to be the end of me. There is no ultimate foundation for ethics, no ultimate meaning in life, and no free will for humans either. What an unintelligible idea.
Most of you recognize this guy. It's the science guy, Bill Nye. And this is a comment he makes. The audio is a little weak on it, so listen up. Well, the audio is not working, but basically he says the whole thing is the kids. That's the main thing. Grown-ups we're not going to influence them. They're gone. So like I'm gone, but he wants my kids, well, my grandkids. The kids are being indoctrinated with anti-science. So a lot of this non-truth stuff that's permeating right now is about taking over the kids. UVA's more, not UVA doctors, but UVA administrators are more concerned with me picking my pronoun than whether I have, wound infections or my patients have pain after surgery. I didn't change jobs, but they changed, I had to do all the paperwork like I was doing a new job. So I like to say I got fired on June 29th and hired at 12:01 on June 30th, but it's just a shift in how they categorized us. But the main thing they wanted with the whole paperwork was me to pick my pronouns. And so I just said doctor. It works for me. But Christians must start our arguments from the truth of God's word, not from presuppositions of a worldview that rejects God. I like this by Lewis because the whole world's running towards a cliff. Those running the opposite direction appear to have lost their mind. So a lot of my colleagues think I've lost my mind, but can live with that. So we're talking about complexity, having parts that connect or go together in complicated ways. And certainly the human body is complex. If you go to the NASA website, they'll say this is the most complex machine ever created. The space shuttle got millions of functioning parts that have to work in sequence to allow it to take off and orbit and land. And we know what happens when those parts don't work. We've lost a couple of shuttles. But I would hope this talk would show you that these guys have much more complexity. They have trillions, not millions, not billions, but trillions of molecular machines that keep them going. Philip Johnson said that the simplest organism capable of independent life, just a bacterial cell like E. coli that gives you a E. coli urinary tract infection, is a masterpiece of miniaturized complexity that makes a spaceship seem rather low tech. So we're going to do biology, back to Biology 101. The first axiom in biology is that all living things come into existence from parents. We just don't spontaneously combust and show up. So there's parents, and this is my daughter, and the third child's in the belly. She's now had 5. My son-in-law, great guy, but an Auburn fan. I have to put up with that. But this is from Psalms. You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. And it's interesting that David used the word knit because he didn't have the electron micrographs. He doesn't have some of the pictures I'll show you that shows you how our bodies knit together. They knit in such a way that my elbow's flexible. The skin gives to let me move it. The joints all work. We're knit together. Our eyes woven together actually as a globe to hold its shape. So it's interesting that the Bible uses terms that David wouldn't have known other than, being inspired by God. So this is the beginning of life, fertilization. When the male sperm joins the female egg, you get a zygote. And a zygote, what makes it special, it has 23 pairs of chromosomes. The sperm and the ovum just have 23 chromosomes each. They've been through a process of meiosis, divided to half of the chromosomes. I'll show you a slide in a minute. But then when they come back together, you get a full complement, and you get a full individual. So you get 23 from each parent. I've got my pointer here somewhere. I purposely took the womb off of this picture because people say, when in the womb does life begin? Most people begin their life right here in the fallopian tube. These fimbriae are like a a baseball glove. And somewhere on this ovary, an egg will be mature. It'll walk around the egg till it, ovary till it finds the egg and sort of encompass it. And the sperm come up the fallopian tube, and life really begins here 3 or 4 days before this actually reaches the womb. So life begins 3 or 4 days before the womb. My daughter, first daughter, was born October of '83. So she was conceived sometime in January of '83. And at the moment of conception, when the sperm hit the egg, it was a done deal. She was going to be a girl. She's going to have brown hair. She's going to have brown eyes. She's going to grow to 5'4", spend a lot of my money. But it was a done deal at that moment. We can't change our genders. There's only two, male and female. And that occurs right up here. And I think God gives you your name right about here, and he'll give us that name when we get to heaven. So this is meiosis. We'll talk about mitosis in a minute, but meiosis is where the ovary and the testicle take the gametes, and let's just say the red comes from your paternal side, the blue are from your maternal side. But in the process of making the sperm and the egg, you see you get a mix of your grandparents in there. Just think of the red and blue as different grandparents. So this is going to have this may make you look like your great-grandmother. This may make you look like your grandfather. So all my kids got their good looks from my wife. I kept mine. So the two cells come together and they form a zygote, which is a complete chromosome. And if you create a whole universe and you create a woman on the 6th day of creation, it's easy enough to fertilize one of her eggs and have a virgin birth. So, if you really understand creation, you understand that a virgin birth is simple. People argue that couldn't possibly happen. In my slide before said you got to have two parents to produce it, but he could just use her egg and fertilize it. Of course, you get really good genes from the father's side in that case. After 24 hours, the first egg splits. You've got an eggshell around this called the zona pellucida. If that eggshell were to crack and those two cells separate and implant the uterus separately, you'd have identical twins because they have the same genetic composition. If you got another egg fertilized, you can have fraternal twins. But generally the eggshell holds together, and after 12 hours or so, you get 4 cells, and you get 8 cells, 16. Finally, average person has 70 to 100 trillion cells. Now Shaquille O'Neal at 7'1", shoe size 22, probably has 120 trillion. So I'll give him a few more trillion cells. These are cells actively dividing. And not only are they dividing, they're talking to each other. Like this may be part of your liver. This may be your heart forming. Another cell dividing, going to be your big toe. But they have to talk to each other, so they put themselves together in the right position. Mitosis is where the cells divide. So you got one cell, it's got to become 2 cells. And you say, well, that's not hard. It just splits down the middle, but it's very complex. Before you can split, you got to replicate your DNA. If you just split, you're going to give the next cell half of that DNA. So DNA replication is not a simple process, and I got a video to explain that. We don't have sound. I need some sound if you got it. It was working earlier. Well, I can describe it, I guess. But this is a video. You can find it on YouTube. It's Your Body's Molecular Machines. It's a very complex situation. To split the DNA, you've got to replicate it. You got to make 2 copies. And all this happens in about an hour as that cell grows and divides. But that's DNA complex. It's woven around itself. But to replicate it, it has to separate to its two chains. This is a guy who does the animation for these, looking at molecular studies. But you got basic sugar phosphone backbone. When it splits, you got A, T, G, and C. That's adenosine, there's different nucleic acids, but they're across each other. And it's like a code. You have a binary code in a computer that's got plus and minus. In our DNA, we have two. Well, this little thing called helicase spins faster than a jet engine. And as it replicates, the one band of the DNA will come down here and get replicated. The other one's more complex because it's backwards. So it has to take it, turn it around backwards. So another machine comes in and starts reading it backwards to transcribe it. And as an end result of all this, you get double your DNA. You get enough to split the cell and form the DNA. So just the machinery is phenomenal. And then chromosomes, once they get the DNA, they have to, it's so long, well, it's not long, if you stretched it all out, a chromosome would be about 7 inches, but you couldn't see it without a microscope or an electron microscope. But anyway, it winds itself into bundles. These are called histones or proteins. And then those wind into bundles and those wind into bundles so that you get a very complex molecule. It's probably the biggest molecule in your body is one of your chromosomes. You got 23, so let's just say chromosome 13. And we've mapped these chromosomes. We know that, insulin's made out of one part and thyroglobulin out of another part, depends on what part's red. This is just the nuclear door closed and you can't see the information inside, but a very complex structure that, if any of your average name's got 5 letters in it, mine's James. So I know that my parents gave me that name. I know it was written, you're eating over here, you ate, I think, eggs and muffins, muffin is, that has to be generated by mind, that name muffin. It's a 6-letter word, but it didn't just come together randomly. We associate it with what a muffin is. We got the biggest word in the world in your chromosomes. You got 3.5 billion letters that have to be in the right order to make you, you, and me. And yet, they want to say, oh, that came together by chance, but they know James didn't come together by chance, the letters and meaning, but yet 3.5 billion come together and they exclude it. So anyway, the cell has to divide. This is looking now into the cell, looking into the nucleus, and you see all the chromosomes, these molecular structures. But each chromosome has to replicate itself and then divide, and then those cells divide. So this just shows a cell dividing. On most mammals, it takes about an hour for a cell to, this is speeded up, but about an hour for it to reproduce itself. And then the chromosomes line up along the spindle, and you got these little arms and legs that hold it together, and then it separates, and it takes the exact replication of your DNA to the next cell. So if you're building a heart, these cells are dividing and are going to be heart cells. And there's a differentiation that knows how to make a heart, which is incredible. But just pick a single chromosome, say it's chromosome 20, and it's got a kinetochore right here, and you got these little microtubules that run into the central portion. And this is one that's already replicated itself. So it's like two chromosome 20s together, and they're going to divide. One's going to one cell, the other half to the other cell. And these little microtubules come to the kinetochore, and it's just shown in red, which means right now the proteins are telling them this is turned off. It's not ready to divide. And these little rods or spindles are building themselves at one end, building themselves at this end, and destroying them at the other end. So they're in a mechanism to move those chromosomes apart. And when it turns on, you actually have little molecules, I call them molecular trucks, that carry away the stop mechanism and actually carry them down these tracks. I'll show you in a minute. It turns green when it's ready to go. And as it turns green, we have molecules that start to carry the stop mechanisms away, like taking the lever out of a gate, or the chain off of the fence. But they're carrying it away. They're actually walking on these spindles, the molecules, and they step over other things that are walking the other direction. pretty amazing on molecules. Now we don't have a video actually seeing this, but it's how they put it together with what they see with molecular microscopes and stuff. Chance would have to be pretty smart to figure this out. He just goes on to say, we know so much, but there's so much we don't know to explain. So anyway, once those cells divide, you get a morula, which is a clump of cells. That's the name for, they say you can do abortion because it's just a clump of cells. Well, it is a clump of cells when it's a morula, but it's still going to be a human being. These cells divide and start to form tissues and organs as the genes turn on and off, and the cells are communicating. Like this cell may be part of your heart, this one may be part of your liver, but they have to organize, or otherwise you'd have parts of liver all over you, if the cell knew to make liver. So at this point, the cells are still undifferentiated. There's a embryo on the tip of a surgical needle. Just an embryo at 3 days. Here's one, 4 days. These are sperm that didn't make it. They got there but didn't fertilize the egg. But the egg's fertilized and it's starting to, these cells divide. This is when the embryos actually reach the uterus. It's come down the fallopian tube and it's starting to implant. And this has the genetic information to make the placenta. The placenta is not part of the mother. This embryo knows to make a placenta to sustain itself. At 8 weeks, fingers and toes are starting to be seen. Internal organs are present. The heart's beating. The baby's moving. It's about 1 inch in size. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in a secret place. That's the fallopian tube. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, that's the mother's uterus. But again, woven, knitted. Interesting choice of words by David. So evolutionists are correct about one fact. We originate from a single cell. A human zygote becomes a human, a dog zygote becomes a dog, a horse zygote becomes a horse. But once that zygote is formed, if you don't take the morning after pill, if you don't miscarriage, or you don't have an abortion, 9 months later you got a perfect human being. This is from YouTube. It's pregnancy. So we're going to do the whole 9 months in 4 minutes. And so it's fast. But these are sperm going through the vaginal canal, pass through the cervix, going through the uterus. They're either going to go left or right. They go to the left, say. Very complex, the tube to carry the sperm here. This is the mature egg. All the sperm are trying to fertilize it. You could be one of lots of different people depending on which sperm gets there first, but I think God determines that. Once it fertilizes, it shuts everything else down. That's the morula running down the fallopian tube, implants in the uterus, makes its own placenta to sustain it, starts to grow. Little what's going to be vessels and heart muscles already beating before the heart's formed. The little cells are beating. By 8 weeks, the heart's beating. It's starting to form the heart. The skin is over the eyes, so that's why they look dark, but the skin becomes transparent. It loses its inner mechanism, and I'll talk about that if we talk about the eye. So we're about 8 weeks here. At 10 weeks, every brain cell you're ever going to have is being formed in the brain. So if you pick 20 weeks to abort the baby, you're getting every brain cell they're ever going to have. And all these connections are being made just like a hard drive to store memories and to help you think. Now the heart's forming valves. At about 12 to 13 weeks, you start seeing the external genitalia that's determined by your genetics. You're either a boy or a girl. The baby's starting to suckle, practice. By 14, 16 weeks, your inner ear's being formed. And this doesn't grow. It's the same size it was when you're in your mother's womb, but he can hear his mother sing and dance to it. So now he's just growing. He's pretty much got all his parts. It would be hard to sustain him on a ventilator at this immature age, but At 20 weeks here, he's probably, viable even, in a NICU. But he's growing, he's sucking his thumb. Doesn't have much to do, sleeps. This is where I think your sin side comes in. He's starting to get mischievous. He'll pull on the cord, try to strangle himself. If you got twins, they'll start to kick each other and fight back. See here, he's going to yank on the cord. He knows that's not good, so he'll just kick mama. So that's quickening. You can feel the baby kicking you. So after 9 months, I could hand this baby to a pediatrician in less than 10 minutes. I can get to your leaking aneurysm in 10 minutes, and I don't even do obstetrics. But New York celebrated you can terminate this baby at this point. They turned the World Trade Center pink, and we can kill them up to term. But I could hand this baby off and have the mother off the table in 30, 40 minutes if her life's in trouble. A partial birth abortion takes a couple of days. You have to give hormones and put cream on the cervix, and takes an hour and a half of general anesthesia to dilate the cervix. Now, California, the House passed a rule that called perinatal abortion. I don't think it's passed the California Senate, but that perinatal, by definition, gives you 28 days after it's born to destroy it. So we got a messed up world. So again, I quote back in Psalms, when all of this happened in a secret place and wove you together, your eyes saw my unformed body. So, God is watching the whole process from the zygote to the baby. And after 9 months, millions of molecular machines have put together tissues and organ systems, and all this comes together in 9 months, and miraculously, you get a little granddaughter. That's Callie, my first granddaughter. So complex is having, again, parts that connect in complicated ways. When I was in med school, we dissected a cadaver, and you got all these body systems. So it just takes a little, and I present this to evolutionists. Why would evolution take, I said, how long would it take evolution to create a skeleton? Well, millions of years. But why would it do it if it didn't think about muscles to put on the skeleton? And you need nerves to tell the muscles how to move to make it functional. There's just no way you can have part of a human. And so you have to have skin, hair, and nails to protect it. You have to have a lymphatic system, an immune system. Get into trouble without that. Endocrine, you got your thyroid that keeps you metabolically active. Your pituitary tells all the glands what to do. Your pancreas makes insulin. So you had to have that. You can live a couple of days without insulin, and it's just like I say, why would you spend millions of years forming a whole cardiovascular system, heart, and all the blood vessels if you hadn't thought of a lung to aerate the blood that goes through it? Digestive system. After a few million years, this creature would need to pee, so you need a urinary system. And, reproductive system. All God created a male and female from the beginning. Our sex organs are complementary, as are all mammals, and they complement. They don't, so you can produce offspring. But even dissecting my cadaver, we looked behind the lungs, looked at the heart. There was no life in him. I didn't know what his life was like, what he experienced. So just having a body of machines doesn't life. Webster defined life. This is an old Webster's from 1900. The quality that distinguishes a vital and functional being from a dead body. That makes sense. And then it talks about the sequence of events, like had a good life, had a bad life, rough life, sequence of events makes up the existence of an individual. And he said spiritual existence transcends physical death. So he talked about life after death. Webster set out to do the dictionary with God's blessing. So now if you get a new edition, 2000 or later, this has been obviously taken out. You know, you don't want to say there's life after death. God defines life as life of the creatures in the blood. I have given it to you to make atonement for yourselves on the altar. It's the blood that makes atonement of one's life. So a lot of references in the Bible to blood. These are red blood cells. This is a white blood cell, leukocyte. If you get strep throat, your white cell count will go up. These are lymphocytes. If you don't have lymphocytes, you can die of AIDS. These are platelets over here. And in this milieu, in the serum, there's hundreds of different factors, or clotting factors that make our blood clot are all in here. So if you ate a donut for breakfast, sugar's in here flowing to your brain to give you some, energy. So very complex with blood. We're in Johnson City. We've got any Tennessee fans here? Raise your hand. Well, I just want to point out all blood is Alabama crimson. Never seen any orange blood when I cut anything. This is a white blood cell, very complex thing. I'll show you a video of the white cell doing its job in a minute. This is a white blood cell, and it's engulfing fungal spores. You're working in your garden, you sniff in a bunch of fungus, and the white blood cells will try to destroy that. These are T lymphocytes that are attacking a cancer cell. You got lung cancer, and they're trying to destroy it. We all make cancer cells in our body, probably daily. But if we got a good immune system and we're nutritiously balanced, a lot of those are destroyed before they become something that can harm us. This is just a capillary, trillions of red blood cells. And within each cell, I'll show you in a minute, there's 300 million molecules of hemoglobin. The numbers are just staggering that we can't even conceive of. This is a blood clot forming. You cut that little finger in the last slide, and you got all this fibrin it's within your clotting factors within the bloodstream. It's forming these bands of fibrin. If you look at it on an electron microscope, it looks like stacks of shingles or something. But anyway, blood clot crystals, and it's trying to stop you from bleeding. The red blood cell is a biconcave disc. When it comes out of the bone marrow, it has a nucleus, but it gives up that nucleus. Within this one cell, there's 300 million hemoglobin molecules. Part of the reason COVID was so bad, it messes up the iron that holds this molecule together, and you can't oxygenate your blood correctly. But the other thing about the cell, because they compare Christ, the blood of Christ, is it's the only self-sacrificing cell. It gives up its nucleus so it can carry more life-sustaining oxygen to every other cell in the body, which is kind of an interesting thing. These are just droplets of water. Numbers I can't explain, 10 to the 21st. That's way past a trillion. Trillions 10 to the 12th. But if you were one of these little droplets of water and you went into one of your brain cells, nerve cells, you'd face over 1 trillion functioning molecular machines, which are just mind-boggling. All of this is the machinery in a nerve cell. That's the nucleus. But all these machines are active doing what they do. You have to have energy. I have to have energy. I ate some eggs over there to stand up here. So energy is a very interesting thing. No one can explain energy. It's like gravity, hard to explain. But you have oxygen in your bloodstream. This has gone through the lung, and it's oxygenated blood. And the oxygen comes across into let's say this is your brain cell. And it has to combine active, this is glucose. So if I eat a donut, I'd have plenty of glucose in there. But the oxygen glucose, through a complex process, produces energy, or what we call adenosine triphosphate. I'll show a video about that. And the waste products are water. These are water droplets, water molecules, and carbon dioxide. Much to Al Gore's chagrin, carbon dioxide is critical. It comes back to our bloodstream, and then we breathe it out to the plants. The plants take carbon dioxide through photosynthesis and make oxygen for us. So it's a well-designed ecosystem. This is your energy plants, the mitochondria. When they tried to clone Dolly, the sheep, she didn't live very long. Most sheep will live 10, 12 years if they're fed and nurtured, but she lived 4 or 5 years, but she didn't have enough mitochondria, so she was always energy deficient. And they're a hard thing to clone. Some people say humans would be almost impossible to clone because the genetic information for the mitochondria come from the mother's egg, and where it's at on the position, it's hard to get it into the next cell unless you're using God's design. So any cloning would be probably mitochondria deficient. I don't know if we'll have sound on this one or not. Yeah, we got sound back. But this is talking about the mitochondria.
It's been called one of the wonders of the molecular world, an amazing nanoscale machine. ATP synthase is a high-tech micromolecular power generator inside the cells of your body. It generates adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, an energy molecule that provides fuel that every one of your cells needs to function. Without this fuel, your cells will cease operation, and so will you. ATP synthase works like a rotary engine. The barrel-shaped rotator is composed of 10 to 15 protein parts called subunits. The rotator spins around, transmitting mechanical energy into the drive shaft of the machine, which helps make ATP. This drive shaft has a specially placed bump that opens and closes parts as the drive shaft spins around. This bump opens special protein subunits on the bottom of the machine. When the bottom subunits open, a spent energy molecule called adenosine diphosphate, or ADP, enters the machine. The mechanical motion causes the ADP to bind with an additional phosphate group, creating the ATP energy molecule. And the ATP drifts off into the cell, ready to power some biomechanical reaction. The ATP synthase machine has many parts we recognize from human-designed technology. A rotor, a stator, a drive shaft, and other basic components of a rotary engine. The ATP synthase is one of thousands of elegantly designed molecular machines inside your cells that make your life and all known life possible. ATP synthase. An example of intelligent design.
Now, when this video says intelligent design, they don't necessarily mean God. Some think it's aliens, more advanced, put us together. So just the word intelligent design, you got to take caution because it may not be God-based. But that ATP that comes off, it's energy, it's got an extra phosphorus, and think of it as gasoline or diesel fuel or a lithium battery. And it goes in and it fires every other machinery in your cell.
This variable is a kinase. I want you to watch it change. It's flipping back.
This is an active protein that picks up the ATP to transfer it to another machine.
That loop.
It'd be like the gas truck that's filling your airplane.
So what is this? Well, it happens to be a protein known as a kinase. Kinases have as their job removing phosphate from one ATP molecule and putting it onto a substrate. So this is the B-cerebral protein.
That's your fuel truck.
ATP is going to come into the mix as a yellow molecule. It binds in what's known as a binding pocket. The phosphate is transferred to the substrate protein in purple.
There's your
The
airplane.
purple protein then undergoes a conformational change in shape, and then it goes off and does its job.
Once
This
it's
is a
changed
very
shape,
common
it's
mechanism
active, it
by
can
which
do what,
signals
if it's
are
an
propagated
insulin molecule,
from
it
the
can do
outside
what
of
it
the
needs
cell
to do.
all the way to the nucleus. So it's that switch, active to inactive, goes back and forth. ATP binds, transfer to substrate. So I'm now going to show you.
Let's go. You know, Charles said, if it could be demonstrated any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive flight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. You know, he realized you couldn't put things together like that. This is Charles and his cousin, the monkey. Actually, I got it reversed, but you can see why when he looked in the mirror, he thought this might be his ancestor. But again, just a jet airplane, there's some airplane stuff in here for you. 4.5 million non-flying parts to make it fly. The cell's got trillions of non-living molecules that come together and make this function and live. And so here's just a picture of a cell, the nucleus. These are the mitochondria. This is the Golgi apparatus, endovascular reticulum. And let's say this is a pancreas cell, it's making insulin. It starts to form them in these vacuoles, and then they're released at the surface. I'll show you a video in just a second of this. But very complex machinery in here. And this is the nucleus. It's sending out the messenger RNA that gets replicated and makes whatever protein this cell is supposed to make. If it's your thyroid, it may be making thyroglobulin. So this is a video of a white blood cell. You can turn the volume down just a little bit. This is a capillary. It's got trillions of red cells running through it. These are white blood cells, and they're kind of walking along, sticking to the surface of the capillary, and it's talking to the other side. So let's say you get a splinter in your finger, and I'll tell you in a minute about that, but on the surface of the white cell, there's all these little molecular trucks. Now we're on the inside of the cell. You got all these little machineries working around. It sustains its own cell wall. It can rebuild it in nanoseconds. Inside, you got scaffolding. These are protein molecules that hold together, just hold the cell together. It can take down the scaffolding it's building it here in nanoseconds. If it wants to separate a part of the cell, it can cleave it with an enzyme, and then this polymer just sort of separates. It's building railroad tracks through the cell, and it builds these, takes them down as it wants. And the reason it has all these railroad tracks, you got all these little molecular trucks that are walking along the tracks. This may be carrying insulin to the surface to release it into the bloodstream. All the railroad tracks go back to Grand Central Station, called the centromere. See, they all come out of that. Behind it, that big structure is the nucleus. Here's the nucleus and the pores that it's letting out messenger RNA. Let's say this is going to make thyroid hormone. So a ribosome comes and attaches to it, starts reading the genetic information to make thyroid hormone. Sometimes it makes stuff that other molecular trucks carry it. This is carrying something to the mitochondria. If it's going to package it to send it to the outside, it's putting it in these vacuoles. You can just think of it as the trailer behind your vehicle. And then the little truck called Kinesin. I love this guy. He's carrying those vacuoles to the Golgi apparatus. All those molecules are in a straight line, and this Golgi apparatus puts them in a three-dimensional conformational shape so that they're functional. And then this is just showing it a vacuole joining the cell membrane and releasing it out to the outside. So you got that splinter in your finger up here. There's a problem, and these protein arms on the white blood cell reach up and talk to the surface. And so within a nanosecond, this white blood cell can get rid of all that scaffolding, change its conformational shape, slip between the two cells lining the capillary to get out into your subcutaneous tissue and form pus. That's what white cells do. They kill the bacteria that's in around the splinter, and that produces the white pus when we drain an abscess. So they have a very busy day monitoring and taking care of problems. Darwin said, "I remember well the time when the thought of the eye made me cold all over, but I have got over that stage of my complaint. Now, small trifling particulars of structure make me very uncomfortable. The sight of a feather in a peacock's tail, whenever I gaze at it, makes me sick." Because he knew he had a false, story. He was walking away from the truth. And I just added this slide. It's from Colossians. I won't read it all, but it says, "He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." Anybody ever heard of laminin? Yeah, so you probably heard that story, but it's the little molecule that holds one cell to another so I don't fall down, on this day. I'm all held together, and it actually looks like a cross, which is kind of interesting. We're going to go through tissues and organs pretty fast because I want to try to get to the ear and eye if I can. So this will be a very rapid transit of pictures. Largest organ we got is probably our skin. I should have quizzed you first. Weighs 6 to 9 pounds. The liver's a close second, but produces hair and nails. And just a little patch of skin on the tip of my index finger has 100 sweat glands, 1,000 touch sensors, 3 feet 4 inches of blood vessels, 1 foot 8 inches of nerve fibers, just in the tip of my finger, if you looked at them microscopically and stretched them out. Very complex structure. This is just a cast of, in the tip of your finger, a little blood vessel coming in, capillary, and all the little vessels. That's why if you've got diabetes and you stick your finger, you get an immediate drop of blood because you're sticking right into this tuft of blood vessels. This is sweat on the surface. Most of us in here have a temperature of 98.6. If it goes to 99, you'll start producing a little sweat. And air current across the surface will evaporate the sweat, and your temperature will come back to 98.6. If you get cold, this little muscle will contract. It'll stand your hair up. You'll get goosebumps. The skin will actually pucker up. It slows the flow of air across the surface. It stops the evaporation of sweat, and your temperature comes back up. So pretty complex system just to do your temperature. Looking down a sweat gland with an electron microscope. Bacteria on your sweat glands, why you should wash your hands before you eat. This is a surgical knot tied. It's a dog. That doesn't heal the dog. It just holds the tissue together so it can heal. And it's these actual fibroblasts or cells in the body that form collagen, and it stacks it up. When I cut you, your wound, it'll stack up collagen. It may be pink or red, and someone will say, "I need to see a plastic surgeon." I said, "No, you need to wait 6 months because other cells called fibroblasts will come in and remold it. Most of them will turn white and fade out. Some people get keloids, which are big stacked up, too much fibroblast activity or not enough fibroclast activity, and you can get stacked up scars. These are just elastic fibers that kind of hold us together and give our skin elasticity. Again, a sweat gland with the gland down here. These little green things are nerve fibers that, innervate our skin. Fat cells, you say, well, that's just a glob of fat. It's really not. It's a very complex cell. This is the nucleus of that cell. These are little organelles, little machinery. This is the stored lipid or fat. And if I'm out hiking on the Virginia Creeper Trail and I need more energy, the mechanism's talking, and this cell starts taking some of this fat, putting it in vacuoles, putting it into the bloodstream so it can go to my liver and be metabolized so I can use it for energy source to move my muscles. So even the fat cells in. Anybody guess what this is? It's butterfly eggs on a raspberry bush. It's not in the body. Just make sure you're awake. But evolutionists, which came first? Why would you form a stomach if you, didn't have gastric acid? And why would you, in other words, do the acid? You couldn't produce the acid without a stomach. Why would you do a stomach if you hadn't thought about small intestines? Why would you have a small intestines if you didn't have a liver? Everything that's eaten and stored, all that, we have a portal blood system. We have a systemic blood system from the heart to our body, but you have a portal system where all the blood from the intestines goes through the liver so that the protein, fat, and carbohydrates can be dealt with. People say, how can you eat and then go operate on somebody? It's because of smooth muscle cells. I don't have to tell them what to do. These are skeletal muscles. I move them around. But the smooth muscle cells do their own work, so I can eat a hamburger and go operate on you, and the smooth muscle cells will do the process of moving the food around and digesting it. So we don't have to direct smooth muscles. We don't have to direct cardiac muscles. They beat on their own. It's a good thing we don't have to remember to tell our heart to beat. But just looking into the small bowel, these are microvilli, and you keep going down, and you see that you got a tremendous surface area. When you do all this, the surface area of your small bowel is about the size of 40 tennis courts. So that's the surface that you're absorbing against. Protein has to be actively absorbed. Unfortunately, sugar and fat just kind of falls right through. A liver, very complex organ, liver cell up here. These are blood vessels. All the blood from the small bowel flows through the liver so that the liver can do its job. Again, this is a real picture of a liver. The little green is bile that your liver's making, but all the blood and nutrients are going to the liver to be processed. The liver has over 400 functions. Carbohydrates, glucose are removed, stored. Lipids and fats are removed and stored. Amino acids are taken up and to make protein synthesis, and so very complex. It gets rid of toxins to help you. Shouldn't be drinking a lot of alcohol, but if you do, the liver will protect you. You'd think the kidney system is simple, just need a pair of kidneys, a pair of urethras, a bladder, and urethra fairly simple, but it's very complex. This is a kidney, and the small molecular unit of the kidney is called a nephron. That's why your kidney doctor is called a nephrologist. And this is a nephron, very complex structure. If you're on a car wreck in the way home, one of the first things that'll try to save your life is this juxtaglomerular apparatus. It senses your blood pressure is dropping because you're losing blood, and it constricts this blood vessel so blood can't flow through the kidney. You'll stop making urine. You'll be saving water. Very complex loop. We could talk about any of these things for hours and hours and hours. So I'm just a whirlwind. This is the loop of Henle. If you take a Lasix, a loop diuretic, it increases the output of urine at this level. So all of these different parts have work. This is called the glomerulus. This is an actual picture of one. Little tuft of blood vessels that run in here. The urine's going to be collected here and run through this tubule. We talked about mitochondria, and if you look at this microscopically, these cells have tremendous number of mitochondria because they have that's your main place where you reabsorb salts. You don't lose the salt that you need for your body. So, and salt has to be, anyway, it's an active gradient, takes energy to go against the gradient. So you could say, well, that should have a lot of mitochondria, and you do. If you look at their cells, they got a lot. This is just a kidney stone. I've had a bunch of these, and I told my wife it's worse than having a baby, and she said, you can't say that. You've never had a baby. I said, yeah, but a couple years from now, you won't hear me say, gee, I think I'd like to have another kidney stone. So we're going to talk about skeleton, muscles, and blood vessels real quick again. Skeleton, 206 bones. I used to know them all. Active tissue, supports your body, extremely strong, lightweight, flexible, repairs itself. If you've got a fracture in your arm, if you look at the x-ray a few years later, you can't see the fracture because it's remodeled itself. It stores minerals, and it's the site of our blood cell production in the bone marrow. This is a femur bone. It's got compact bone that gives it strength. It's got spongy bone at the end that allows you to sort of as a shock absorber, like shocks on your car. And in the middle, you got the bone marrow, or the blood factory. Skeletal muscles, 640 muscles. You have control of all 640, 2/5 of your body's weight. They work in groups. If you try to golf, it takes about 90 different muscles in the right order to have a good golf swing. Now, I only use about 45, I think. So. But they work in groups, and it's called muscle memory. Your brain nerves have to memorize that pathway. All the muscles taper down to tendons, and they move bones at very accurate angles and precise distances. You wouldn't want me to operate on you if I couldn't do it precisely. So we're very well built for that, controlling all these muscles. These are just skeletal muscle fibers in a bundle. If you do a muscle biopsy, that's what you'd have. But these you can start breaking down into muscle fibrils and then down to the active parts till you actually get to the molecules. And the two main molecules are myosin and actin. And just like the little guy that walks along the tracks there, these walk along each other. So if you want to move that muscle, this molecule has to walk along that molecule and contract it. And that's done in nanoseconds. I'm moving all over the place. So all of those little things are working. This is just a electron micrograph of the muscle fibers. You would expect you need a lot of oxygen to make your muscles work. So you got lots of little capillaries, lots of blood vessels bringing oxygen to the muscle. This is a professional golfer, Johnson. And just watch the video and think about how many muscles he's moving, his eye and hand coordination, and how finely tuned his muscle memory is. Any golfers in here? Raise your hand. I've started playing woke golf. That's where you hit the ball and then you pick it up and put it where you feel it should have landed. And I've shot par ever since. Heart, it's dynamic, untiring, 3 billion beats per average lifetime now. Adam and some of those lived 900 years, had 30 billion heartbeats. It's not the source of our soul, it's just a muscle. But it works with the lungs. You got to have all this together, and you have to have a diaphragm to move the lungs. So very complex. I don't know how you could say it was made without design. This is actually arterial blood going to the lung because it's been deoxygenated. It gave oxygen off to the tissues, so it's the only blue blood you have in an artery is in your lungs, and it goes through across the alveoli, becomes oxygenated or red to go back out to the body. And you got 300 million alveoli in each lung, huge surface area, again, 40 times greater than your outer body surface area. And it's inside of a capillary, of an alveoli. So here's an alveoli, oxygen comes across. If you get, when people say they got fluid on their lungs, they have fluid in this membrane here, so it diminishes how oxygen can diffuse to the red blood cell. The red blood cell goes through the lung in about 3/4 of a second, so it doesn't have a long time to pick up oxygen. So if you got fluid here, it's harder to get the oxygen to it before it's gone, and that's why you see some people on oxygen, because it's increasing the oxygen concentration out here and increasing the diffusion across to the red blood cell. But once it's oxygenated by the lungs, it comes back to the left side of the heart and then pumps out through the aorta to go through all the bloodstream. And this is just like in your brain, the red blood cells oxygenated come through and it gives off oxygen to the brain cells and then takes carbon dioxide back to the lung. Our nerves, constantly alive with electricity that communicate, coordinate. If you put all your nerves end to end, how long do you think it would be? Remember, it's in the tip of my finger, I got 1.8 feet of nerves. But if you put all the nerves together end to end, estimated would go around the world 2.5 times. That's a nerve bundle. This is a nerve brain cell. It's talking to other cells. You got a swan cells on it. That's just like putting a black coating on your electric wire so you don't lose your energy that's transmitted through here. It's transmitted by a flow of electrons. We won't go into all of that, but it moves energy along the nerve till it reaches the synapse, and there's several things can happen there. This could attach to a muscle that it's going to make the muscle move. It could attach to another nerve because you have to have a whole complex of nerves firing at the same time to swing the golf club. So it could be going to another nerve. And it releases these vacuoles. So I got a little video of that here. Again, we don't have sound, but maybe turn it down. But that's just a nerve, and see it's generating this energy, and it's touching the dendrites of other nerves, and it sets up a whole complex. And that's when you do muscle memory. You're getting those same nerves to talk to the next nerve to make that muscle move in a precise mechanism. Whether you're doing ballet or swinging a golf club, the energy comes down here, and calcium is critical for this, releases neurotransmitters that go across the synapse, and other things activate this synapse to make it receptive to the neurotransmitters. When we do a nerve block to operate on you, we can stop that transmission so that muscle's paralyzed, or, when we put people to sleep, we use drugs that stop this thing from functioning. But once it functions, it lets sodium items pour in, and it starts to commit the transfers. If it's a muscle cell, it makes it twitch. If it's a nerve, it sends a signal to the next bunch of nerves. So a very complex electrical system. Brain. All those cells were formed at about 10 to 12 weeks in the mother's womb that you're ever going to have. And when you get a memory, all those complexes get stored in here. I could, like I said, I was graduated Avenue High School in 1972, so remember your graduation, remember something that happened, and I can bring you to a memory that you maybe hadn't thought of in 10 or 12 years by getting you to go to the right part of your hard drive and pulling up that memory, and you can remember, what the speaker said, or, you fell on the stage or whatever. I can bring back memories. And, God has our hard drive. So if you try to tell God, I never thought that, I never did that, He can just say, well, let's just go pull it up and bring that right back to you. So good thing to remember. Very complex system. I'm going to talk quickly about the 5 senses. I mainly want to focus on the eye and the ear because God focuses on them. He actually mentions them in the Bible. But smell, COVID messes up your smell because COVID messes with your olfactory bulb here that helps you smell. But all of this is tied, and it's tied down here to taste. That's why food tastes better if you can smell it and it smells good. So all that's tied together. But lets you smell these flowers. That's a pollen. I've got ragweed in my nostrils now from doing the hay. Tongue, very complex, got the glossopharyngeal nerves, and some taste salt, some taste sour and sweet, but different nerves. And your actual nerve buds look like little flames, don't they? I think James didn't know it, but he wrote this verse, James 3:6, the tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and it itself set on fire by hell. So I think God has a sense of humor when He made our tongue look like fire. This is just salt and pepper, refined sugar and raw sugar. this is better for you. But the tongue lets you taste this biscuit and jam, and this is clotted cream. It takes about 12 hours to make clotted cream, but it's better than butter. If you ever go to England, they have a lot of clotted cream and biscuits. This is bacteria on your tongue. You might want to brush your tongue when you brush your teeth. All these little nerve fibers in your finger, that's touch. They're other third sense, and let you touch this baby's hand. I wanted to focus on the eye and ear. The hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made them both. He didn't say he made our spleen. He did, but he didn't mean it. But I didn't mention it. But it's interesting that both the eye and ear are spoke about in the Bible. And this is the ear. As I was telling you, this is formed in your 14th to 16th week in your mother. You can start to hear her sing. But it's a very complex structure. Your eardrum, acoustic energy hits it. Goes to mechanical energy. This little thing pushes on the eardrum and changes. I'll show you anyone ever heard of the organ of Corti? Smallest organ in our body. I'll show you that in a minute. It sits inside of this semicircular canal inside of this little tube in the middle. It's the smallest organ in our body. But, they say the eardrum can detect the movement 1/10 of the diameter of a hydrogen atom, but when you think about it, a cricket a block away wiggles his legs, it compresses air, that compressed air moves across the block, and it hits your eardrum, and it can recognize that. Now the eardrum's alive, it's got blood vessels going through there that would be like the Mount Everest compared to a gravel. The gravel's the cricket movement, but these big boulders of red blood cells are pouring through there. But your body knows to tune those out. So it moves that eardrum, and then that goes through the mechanical energy, and it presses on what's called the stapes, which looks like a stirrup on a horse, and it pushes on the oval window. Now, if you just tried to put a cork in this bottle and it was full of water, I couldn't do it. But if I put a diaphragm on the bottom, then I could move that water in and out because the diaphragm removes. So God put a diaphragm right here that lets this water, as you compress this, it lets it move back and forth. So it keeps the thing circulating. This up here is good for pilots. That's yaw and everything is determined by our sense of gravity. Tells you if you're upside down or not. When you get vertigo, this is all messing up and you don't know where you're at in space. But we're just going to talk about this inner ear. That's just pictures of it, like I showed in the baby. But here's the organ of Corti. You got in that semicircular canal 3 little channels, and imagine that fluid that's being compressed is moving back and forth. And inside of this inner chamber, the cochlear duct, is this organ of Corti. So imagine this is a little temporal membrane. It's like a bone, and your organ of Corti is attached to the bone by hair cells. And it'd be like this is a boat. These are ropes holding the boat to the dock. It's a way to look at it. And this water is moving back and forth, and it's moving the little boat up and down, and it's fixed against the temporal membrane. There's just a magnified view of the same thing. And this little organ is connected by nerve cells that run out to the auditory part of your brain. And so as it moves these little hair cells, you got 4 different bundles, 3 together here, 1 down here. I'm not sure why. This one gets torn when you work with John Deere tractors and fly airplanes, and it separates, and we lose some of our hearing frequently. But these little cells, here's one that's, see, it's torn away. So this person has a hearing deficit. And again, just electron micrographs, these little green arrows are on the nerves going away from these little fibers. So you got 3 rows of hair cells. That's what they look like. They look like pipe organs when you start to magnify them. Just other views of these little hairs, and they're stacked up in systems. And not only are they pipe organs, there's a little trap door in the top of them, and there's a little spindle a molecule from the one above it to the trap door, like that. And so as this moves up and down and those hair follows the move, it opens and closes this trap door. if you're young and you got a good hearing frequency, that trap door can open and close 20,000 times per second. When it opens and closes, these sodium molecules pour into it. And we won't go into all the physics, but lots of physics here, that says you change the polarity of that cell, and it tells the nerve that you're listening to this song. That's not going to, yeah, here it plays. And your ear can distinguish one note from the other. If I played, it wouldn't be that pretty. But, you know, that little mosquito wiggles his legs, and I hear it, my brain says, oh, that's a mosquito. I memorized that sound, or memorized this piece of music. And we'll talk about the eye next. This is Steve knew what the bird was. It's a rose-breasted grosbeak. Hopefully the sound will work, but that's what he sounds like. So when your ear hears that, if you're knowledgeable, you say, well, that's a rose-breasted grosbeak. So what do you start to do? You look for him. So you start looking with your eye. You want to see this guy. And the eye lets us see the world, lets you see your pretty little granddaughter. She says I live around her little finger. She's 8 now. She waves bye like this. But the eye is very complex. And just, you know, when we first started laparoscopic surgery, we were like operating with one eye because you were just seeing a two-dimensional shape. So in a training residence, which I still do, they'll pass where they're supposed to be with the instruments because you have to basically learn training one eye. Now, robotic surgery's come along with 2 cameras that gives you, you know, binocular vision so you can, you know, be more accurate with what you do. So if you get a choice between robotic and laparoscopic, choose robotic. But all of these muscles are very complex and they work in synchrony with the other eye. And, you know, if you just roll the eyes over, you'd be still out of focus. So the one eye has to move differently than the other eye to bring that focal point into existence. So just very complex muscles that surround the eye. This is a teardrop. It's not simple. It's very complex with lubricants to lubricate your eye. That's why you can get bioartificial tears. You can't just use saline or water. It's not the same thing. Structure of the eye, you know, in the baby in the womb, this was dark. And it's basically skin. It loses its blood vessels, gives them up. So the cornea of the eye has to be oxygenated by air. When they first invented contact lenses, you had to take them out after 4 or 5 hours because your cornea needed oxygen. Now the new lenses are porous and oxygen can diffuse through them. But the only way this gets oxygen is through the air. And this is your lens back here. And then you got complex muscles here that open and close the aperture of your cornea, of your pupil, depending on the light you're focusing. The lens, if these little muscles relax, it goes back to a spherical shape, which lets you read close up, lets you look at the book. If I want to look off in a distance, they contract, and it pulls the lens down to a straight shape so you can see at a distance. And as we get older, our lens gets hardened, and it doesn't want to come back to the sphere. And so you start reading, holding your book down here, and then you get bifocals. I actually got mine in my pocket. But you have to help this lens because it gets old. The lens pretty much dies after birth. It has these nuclei cells as it's developing, and it makes a protein that's called crystalline, but it's like a crystal, and you can see through it, but it looks like stacks of lumber built up. And the stacks are held in place by these little pins and needles. But the cells are actually dead, so it's not alive. That's why you can transplant a lens from somebody to someone else, and you don't have to use any anti-rejection agents because the lens is not alive. And but you got this crystalline in there that focuses on it. And then say it gets rough as you get older, and you start losing some vision. This is a cataract. See how it's clouded? But basically, light comes in through the thing. It's focused on the certain part of the retina. and that's the optic nerve coming in and the blood vessels. And right here is the fovea, and that's where your best vision is. You see your peripheral vision out here in the cones and rods, but if you want to focus on something, you have to get your eye lined up to bring the optics to that area. We don't see these blood vessels in our eye. You can see them if you take a piece of paper, punch a hole in it, stand against a wall and just flick it real fast. You can start to see these vessels appear in your own eye. And the reason we don't see them, the eye only sees something that's moving. That table's not moving, but I can see it. That's because my eyes are fasciculating. You can't see them. It's such a fine movement. But if my eye wasn't moving, I couldn't focus and see that table. So it's a very complex system there. That's just the fovea centralis of the retina. These are what the rods and cones look like in the human retina. But it'll let you see this sunset. Again, from the Bible, he who planted the ear, shall he not hear? He who formed the eye, shall he not see? So, God can really hear our thoughts, which goes beyond audition, and he can see into our hearts. But, he mentions the eye and the ear in the Bible. That's why I spent more time on them. The eyes of the Lord upon the righteous, his ears are open to their cry. So, mentions those two a lot. So, here's my evolutionary friends. This little amoeba here is the first cell that they say is animal life. And he's decided he's going to make a complex human being over millions of years. But he has to work with his buddy, the plankton, the first plant cell, because he's got to have a system that makes oxygen for his system he's going to make. Now, he's forethought all of this, according to evolutionary biology, or chance just happened to bring it together. But one of the things they had to think up and plan was this little guy. See if we got music. Yeah, you got any sound? Well, anyway, I put him to the Bee Gees. This is the way I walk or something. And you can't live without this little guy in every cell of your body moving stuff around. So that amoeba and plankton had to be pretty smart to put the first human together. And this is a video from British thing, but not only humans, just think of the whole ecosystem, the whole world. Some of you may have seen this video, some of my partners may have shown it, but just think about the design of the human body, but then put that together with the complexity of the world. Glad we got sound.
I have felt the wind blow, whispering your name. I have seen your tears fall when I watch the rain. And how could I say there is no God when all around creation calls a singing bird, a mighty tree, the vast expanse of open sea. Gazing at a bird in flight, soaring through the air, lying down beneath the stars. I feel your presence there. I love to stand at ocean shore, signs of a rose in bloom. A newborn's cry at birth. How could I say there is no God when all around creation calls a singing bird, a mighty tree, the vast expanse of open sea. It's time to stand at ocean shore and feel the thundering breakers roar, to walk through golden fields of rain, 'neath endless blue, horizons frame. I just like a child. I believe.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and He created the earth for us to live in. He was going to create our bodies, but we had to have a place that could sustain us. And astrophysicists say the chance of an earth coming together to sustain life is astronomically impossible, but still they don't want to believe. They want to give chance the qualities we give God. You know, if there's a creator, its logical creator can sustain life for as long as he wishes. He gives us certain days to live. In the event of death, he can resurrect us back to life. Evolution, in contrast, has matter, energy, time, chance, no guiding force, no purpose, no goal, thus no hope of a resurrection after death. So, you know, most of the residents I train, when I have a person die, I'll say, what do you think happens? And they say, well, that's just it, you know. That's the philosophy they've been taught through high school and college, and so they don't really understand. And then about 1 out of 3 or 4 will say, well, what do you think? And so you get to give them the gospel. But the same divine power that created everything, it sustains and controls the universe. It also secures our salvation. And that's the blessing we have. This is a young lady, age 8, painted this painting, portrait of what she thought Jesus might look like. We have no way of knowing, but I taught my kids, you know, 3 verses to remember. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And if you can wrap your head around that, you know, we don't really give it a lot of thought, but if you can create everything. I had a person say, well, do you really think parted the Red Sea? And I'm like, well, yeah, I believe the first verse of the Bible. And they go, well, what's that got to do with the Red Sea? They at least knew it wasn't talking about that. So if you can create a universe, how hard is it to part the sea? If on the sixth day of creation you can produce a woman with all her parts and she's talking to you, how hard's a virgin birth? I said the Bible becomes simple if you accept the first verse. The middle verse is it's Psalms 118:8. It's better to trust the Lord than put confidence in men. No one was there at creation. Creation is not science, it's supernatural. In the process of creating, you create all science. When God put the earth together, he put together physics and mathematics and biology and all that. So you don't have to separate. Separating God from science is like separating Henry Ford from engineering. If you're trying to explain an automobile, you don't have to pick between one or the other. You can have both Henry Ford and engineering to put together an automobile. So you can have God and science to put together creation. In the last verse of the Bible, the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with you. Amen. This was the beginning, not the end. And it's our purpose to preserve the gospel, proclaim the gospel. And then we, in this day and time, going to endure the suffering that will follow. I get mocked and told I'm crazy and everything else, but it's still worth presenting the gospel as truth. Jesus actually told Pilate before his crucifixion in John, I think 18:36, I may have it wrong, but I was born and came to the earth to blank, 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 blank. I got it wrong. I said to save the lost. But he said, I came to testify to the truth. And Pilate mocked him, what is truth? And we're utterly mocking truth now. I mean, I could try to tell you I'm a different gender or I'm an animal or whatever, and you're supposed to wrap that in as truth. So we've walked away from truth so much. Truth is not a thing, it's a person. Jesus said, John 14:6, I'm the way, the truth, and the light. So truth is God, truth is Jesus. Those that accept that truth have Jesus' true promise that if you love me and obey me, you can live forever with my Father in my Father's house, paradise, which will be better than the video I showed you of the earth. So that's it. Thank you.